want you to imagine, just for a moment, that you are a middle-aged male high school principal. Now, some of you might be middle-aged men already, and if you are, congratulations. But for those of us who are not, let's just take a second to get in that headspace. So now I'd like you to imagine, middle-aged male high school principal that you are sitting at your desk, you're getting a lot done, and you see a high school girl walk into your office, and she sits down, and she starts talking about her period. And not only is she talking about her period, no, she is talking about her friends' periods and her classmates' periods, just a whole lot of period talk. Now, I want you to ask yourself, middle-aged male high school principal that you are, do you think you're uncomfortable right now? The answer is probably yes. And it makes sense, right? Because period poverty and menstrual hygiene are what I like to call you issues. Isolating issues, issues that we expect those affected by them to deal with privately. It is definitely not an issue that we feel any sense of community ownership or urgency over. Now, period poverty and menstrual hygiene are like a lot of the most relevant and important issues in our world today. Everything from systemic oppression to food insecurity, these are you issues, isolating issues. But how do we, as leaders, as people who want to make change, push past this discomfort and move an issue out of the realm of you and into the realm of an everyone issue, something that we as a community are all working to change? Now, as you might have imagined, that high school principal who I had you picture is in fact my high school principal. And though he is a wonderful man and does a lot for his students, he, like a lot of people, and men in particular, is made very uncomfortable by the idea of periods. And I first ran up against this in my sophomore year, when I, alongside my fellow student government officers, began advocating for the installation of free menstrual hygiene product dispensers in all female restrooms in our school. We would come into our principal's office week after week, and we would sit down and we would tell him about the discomfort that we had experienced and the anxiety that came with getting your period as a young person in school. Now, finally, we got these dispensers installed and we were so excited. But then I remember thinking, what if you couldn't access these dispensers? What if, because of your gender identity or presentation, you were unable to use the female restroom? Or what if you could use the female restroom, but after school hours, because of an unsafe home environment or financial instability, you were unable to access the products you needed? Or what if you weren't at the high school at all? What if you were a middle school student or an elementary school student who got their period? What did you do then? This is where my organization Go With The Flow comes in. I began Go With The Flow in the fall of my junior year, and we use community support and community donations to package and distribute free bags of menstrual hygiene products to K-12 schools and community centers throughout our area. Now, behind me on screen is a picture of our very first event. And as you can see, we had over 30 volunteers, including school board members, parents, students, teachers, and community members, all coming together to help us package thousands of Go With The Flow bags. Now, this is a pretty big jump, right? In a matter of months, we went from trying to convince our principal that this issue mattered at all to a community-recognized and celebrated effort to gain equal access to much-needed products for any student in need. So how did we get from point A to point B? I went ahead and broke it down into 5 steps. First, we want to share stories. Second, find inclusive solutions. Third, celebrate action. Fourth, continue. And fifth, make it your own. Now let's talk a little bit about what each one of these really looks like. First, we want to share our stories. Now, facts and data are incredibly important, especially as we are first trying to convince people of the necessity of a widespread solution. But if all we are doing is providing facts and data without any human connection or story, we will get nowhere. My fellow student government officers and I could have sat down in our principal's office and told him day after day that half of his students were getting periods. But until we were able to really explain to him what it felt like as a young person getting your period in school, it wasn't until we could do that that we could build the empathy and the urgency we needed from him to make real change. Moreover, when we share our stories, we are able to bring more people into our solutions. By sharing our experiences as young menstruators, we were able to connect with menstruators of all generations who saw themselves reflected in our organization and related to our experiences, joining our team and becoming dedicated to making change for generations to come. Next, we want to find inclusive solutions. And this might seem a little bit obvious. I mean, of course, we want to find solutions. Especially in the early stages of our action, we want to prove to people that we have a plan, that we can be trusted. But more than just finding solutions, we want to find inclusive solutions. Because unless we are trying to help as many people as possible, we are in a lot of ways still exclusionary in our so-called solutions. This was one of the things I was most proud of through Go With The Flow. We were able to expand the lens of who is typically affected by period poverty and menstrual hygiene needs. Because more often than not, when we imagine a young menstruator, we picture someone in older high school, maybe a cisgendered girl. But the truth is, menstruators come in all shapes and sizes. Through Go With The Flow, we were able to recognize that students needed access to these products, regardless of their age, of their gender identity or presentation, or of their socioeconomic status. We were able to meet the needs of a broader community by getting our products available in single-stall, gender-neutral restrooms, in after-school centers, and in middle schools and elementary schools. When we widen the lens of who is affected by any given issue, we can bring more people into our community and have a significantly broader reach of the change we are trying to make. Next, we want to celebrate action. As with the most important and relevant issues in our world today, they can sometimes feel insurmountable. Everything from period poverty to systemic oppression, these are dark issues. And while it's important to recognize the magnitude of the issues we are trying to tackle, if we stay too mired in this knowledge, we will lose energy and optimism like that. So we need to find ways as leaders to embed joy and embed celebration into the very structure of our organizations, recognizing that even the smallest step forward is still progress and worthy of celebrating. At our first Go With The Flow event, yes, we had thousands of bags that we packaged as a group. But we also had some great snacks, and we got to know one another, and we listened to music. By embedding this celebration into our very first step, we found the joy and the energy needed to continue our work for months to come. Next, we want to continue. And this might seem a little bit obvious. But as we're getting into our celebration and our action steps, it can feel like we are on top of the world. We are making real change. And it's easy to forget that just a few steps ago, we were trying to convince people that these issues even mattered at all. We have to remember that if we wait too long before reminding people that our organizations still exist and that change is still needed, the urgency and the energy we have fought so hard for will start to fade away. And we have to give ourselves grace, right? Recognizing that we as leaders have other jobs. We cannot expect ourselves to devote 100% of our time to the change we're making. But we have to find something small we can do every few weeks or every month, just enough to remind people that our organizations still matter and that these issues are still relevant. This was something we had to learn at Go With The Flow through COVID, because we were not able to provide millions of Go With The Flow bags to everyone in need in our community. But as often as we could, we would bring a bin or two of our bags to our school district's distanced lunch pickup. Additionally, on screen behind me are two fantastic young women who will be taking over the reins of Go With The Flow when I graduate at the end of this year. In this way, we have ensured that Go With The Flow will continue, not only through these months of COVID wackiness, but also in the years to come, becoming not just a Band-Aid solution, but an instrument of broader, more systemic change. Now, finally, we want to make it our own. And while the last 4 steps have all been very outward-facing, this is something that we as leaders need to do internally. Now, as we are working to get our change off the ground, it can sometimes feel like all we are doing is talking. We are trying to convince people why these issues matter. We're trying to build energy and urgency. We're trying to bring people together. And that is exhausting. But if we are also spending our energy trying to fit into these boxes of what a leader is supposed to look like or sound like or act like, what society, our families, or ourselves have told us we should be, we are not going to have the energy to make the change we seek. So we need to find ways to recognize that we are enough. Every part of our identities is there for a reason and is equipped for the change we are trying to make. So what does this look like in our actual solutions? For me, it looked like little notes. I have loved notes since I was little. I've saved them from my mom and from my grandma. So finding ways that we, as often as possible, could include notes in our go-with-the-flow bags ensured that I remembered who I was, that this change felt like me, and that I could remember that I, just as I am enough. Now, as we approach real community change, we want to remember to share stories, building that human connection. We want to find inclusive solutions, bringing more people into our communities. We want to celebrate action, knowing that even the smallest step forward is still progress and worthy of celebrating. We want to continue knowing that without continuity, our organizations will too quickly fade into the background. And we want to make it our own, trusting that we, just as we are enough for the change we seek. Now, period poverty was my issue, but it might not be your issue, and that's okay. But I would ask you to think about your schools or about your communities and think about what's missing. I know for me, as I sometimes try to identify where I need to lead, I think about what makes me the happiest or what makes me the saddest when I see it in the world. Because more often than not, the things we care about most are connected to our strongest emotions. So I would ask you to think about what breaks your heart or what makes you joyful to the point of tears. And stand there. Plant yourself there. Lead there. And when you do, you might experience real discomfort, but you will make real change. Thank you.